Hello and welcome to day 2 of Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week. Here in our Gifted Kids, we're celebrating Gifted Joy this week, and we're super excited to be doing that. Today's episode is with my friend Justin. He was originally from the US, now living in Australia. He's a dad, he's a high school teacher, and most importantly, he is a self-confessed, obsessed board gamer. And when I thought about doing Gifted Joy, I naturally thought about board games. And I naturally thought about Justin because I don't know anyone else who has gone as a deep dive into board games as Justin. He's a wealth of knowledge, and it was an absolute delight to talk to him today about board games. So thank you very much for your time, Justin. Hugely appreciate it. Board games are awesome, and they can be a bit of investment. As a family, we've got into a habit of every Christmas investing in a significant board game as a family, and smaller board games for birthday presents and things like that. But they're a lot of fun, and there's such a huge variety. And as we talk about in the podcast, like, I didn't really grow up being a big board gamer. When I was a kid, it was all Operation and Monopoly. There wasn't a whole lot around like there is today. So this was a whole new world for me as a parent, and it's one that we really enjoy. So I hope that you get a lot out of today's episode as well, and find that it's something that you could explore more deeply with your family, whether that's yourself with your kids or like just as grown-ups. I have actually been to a social evening with other mums, and we played board games, and it was a huge laugh. So lots of fun to be had. And this week, we're of course talking about Gifted Joy. We're doing a podcast every day this week to support Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week, as brought to us by the G Word, and we're a proud partner of the G Word film. So be sure to register. The details are in the show notes. There's lots going on this week outside of what we're doing, so do check that out at the G Word. If you haven't already, you can subscribe at Our Gifted Kids so you don't miss any of our podcasts. And at the moment, until the 3rd of November, the Our Gifted Kids online communities are open. We have 3 new communities online for people to choose from. So there is something for everyone. So check that out in the show notes. Take care and jump onto Facebook or Instagram and let me know, what is your favorite board game? What is it that your family loves to play? Either your kids or yourself, and let us know so we can share and inspire others to try them out as well. So stay quirky, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. Take care and bye. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted, because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. It has been a very big week here on the Our Gifted Kids. Massive week for Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week. A whole week of podcasts, and the theme this year is all about equity and joy. And Our Gifted Kids, we're focusing on the joy component because I thought, why not? Let's have some fun this week and shake it up a little. So today I'm very excited to be talking to a friend of mine, Justin Ratcliff, because when I thought about joy and the things that my kids love and we do as a family, for me, I'm like, board games came up. And when I was thinking about doing the podcast, I'm like, who can I talk to about board games? And I don't know anyone who knows more about board games than Justin. So Justin, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So when I think about this week's theme and Gifted Joy, board games definitely come up because I don't know about you or anyone listening, but when I was a kid, board games extended to Connect Four, Monopoly, Operation, and like Guess Who, right? The one where you've got to guess the face. We weren't a big board game household, and I don't know, maybe that was just the 80s. Maybe that was all that was on offer. I don't know. But when I became a parent, this was a really new space for me. And early on in our parenting journey, it was actually a psychologist who had suggested to us it when we were looking at some challenges we were having with one of our kids about not just winning and losing, but trying hard things and doing difficult things and being uncomfortable in difficult places because that was such a rare occurrence for them. She was actually like, just play some quick card games like Fish or just something really quick, because then you're just practicing that winning and losing really quickly, and it's low stakes, and it's just about forming that habit. And so ever since then, our family has kind of gone on this board game adventure, which greatly accelerated when we met Justin and his family and started playing board games. So Justin, first of all, what is it about board games that you love?
Well, I have a confession. I didn't care for board games in my probably like 20s or 30s, and I was working with someone that was really into board games, and I'm like, really, you're a grown man, like, what are you doing still playing board games or whatever? So I had kind of this chauvinistic attitude about it. And then of all games, we had a copy of Cluedo kicking around, and we sat down and played it, and I was absolutely hooked. So through the power of Cluedo, which probably doesn't necessarily rate very highly, that was my introduction to board gaming, and I became, I'll say, obsessed, and then leading to quite the collection now. But yeah, just beware that if you a game could hook you. So but in my teenage years, I played a lot of Risk with my friends, which is a very mean player elimination board game that falls under the category of Ameritrash, but it's an Ameritrash classic. And it's that if Monopoly is still selling copies, Risk is definitely still selling copies, even in 2021 or 22. So
So
Cluedo, watch your step.
yeah, you never know what gets you. I have to say, I really enjoy playing Flip with the kids. And I played as a kid, but the new version, Flip, is quite cheeky.
It is.
And yeah, and it can be quite harsh, and it's a
Well,
lot
it's
of
got that
fun.
dark side and that light side,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. It's just that added complexity, because let's face it, the gifted brain loves complexity, loves problem solving, making connections, uh, and many gifted people will have strengths in the visual spatial areas and working memory and processing and all these sort of things. So like board games, this is our jam, right?
Well,
But you,
Uno has always been a top three favorite. Like when Michelle and I first met, and we were backpacking around Japan and like camping and stuff, like we had a deck of Uno cards with us. I love Uno. I think it's a fantastic game.
yeah, it is. It is. It really is one of my faves. But you touched on something there when you were talking about Risk, and you categorized that game. And so this is something I learned only a few years ago at the beginning of my board game journey. And it's that there are different types of board games. And so one that we have latched onto is a collaborative style of board game. And we did that because as a family, sometimes it can be a challenge. The winning and losing can be a challenge. But
Yeah,
if you're playing one-on-one against each other, like losing can be really hard, right? But if
yeah,
you're playing as a team to in that board to like win in that board game, it lessens the impact of losing.
yeah,
So it becomes a really great way of learning that, practicing not being good at something, or losing something without the stakes being quite so high.
right.
And so we kind of dived into this collaborative board game space. But tell us a little bit about some of the different types of board games that are around these days.
Well, as you mentioned, there's collaborative, there's competitive. So that would be one of the most basic categories. And a category probably even more basic than that is whether or not it's an abstract game or it's a game that has themes. So the game that's going to be closest to our understanding of abstract is chess. Chess is an abstract game. Chess is also a perfect information game where you're not hiding your cards behind you. You're definitely hiding, your intentions other than winning, but there's no theme whatsoever. Even though the pieces are carved into like rook and queen and stuff like that, beyond that, there's no theme whatsoever. Whereas you can have a very heavily themed game. And this is an example of a cooperative, this game Horrified, where you're actually defeating or fighting cooperatively against classic like silver screen monsters. So you're fighting against Dracula, you're fighting against the mummy, the werewolf, there's even the swamp creature in here. So this would be an example of a heavily themed game. And then sitting underneath of that theme are the mechanics. So whereas chess is just raw mechanics, some games like Horrified will have that layer of theme sitting on top of the mechanics of the game, where it's like card drafting or set collection. And then I mentioned the categories of Ameritrash versus the opposite. I don't know if it's the opposite, but you have a category of game called Euros. So going back to your copy of Catan, Catan is probably the classic example of a Euro-based game where there's not a lot of conflict. You're gaining victory points, high-end wood components and stuff. Whereas Ameritrash is just, you open the box and it's 800 pounds of plastic and cards and just bits and pieces flying everywhere. And that title of Ameritrash is kind of, it's not meant to be pejorative. It's meant to kind of be endearing, but when you open a box of Risk, it's just plastic everywhere. So I don't know where the origins or when it originates that it's called Ameritrash, but that's a whole genre. And then in the fullness of time, like you have hybrid Euro / Ameritrash. So you give it enough time, people are going to put all the bits and pieces together. But that covers probably the broadest categories within board gaming.
Wow, I hadn't even heard of those. So
yeah,
let me grab.
People do very deep dives with this stuff, but it's a creative process. You're talking about there's probably easily 10,000 different kinds of board games and stuff. So there's a lot of creativity in there. There's a lot of like just rehashing of mechanics and stuff because it's hard to create something completely new. So a lot of variety.
And mechanics being, the way the game is played.
Exactly. Like, are you throwing dice to advance the game or the story? Are you using cards? Are you using action points? All kinds of things.
Yeah.
Is it a deck builder? Like, I know that Star Realms is very popular in your house, and it's definitely popular in our house too. But that is another genre called a deck builder, where you start with a deck of pretty weak cards, but then you can use the currency from those cards to buy more powerful cards. And then you slowly build up a hand of cards that can be quite devastating. And that's the charm of it. That's when you lay down all your strongest cards, bang, 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 you just get a big grin on your face because you're about to unleash hell.
Yeah, and there's a lot of strategy and complexity to that. So Star Realms, I meant to grab it, but it is a card game. There's lots of cards. Now the kids always want to play it with me, and I've just it's never quite stuck. So I'm always like, help mommy, be kind. But it's this, there's complexity to it, there's strategy to it. And you sort of, one of these card games you can play, I think, with up to 4 people. And you're, like you said, you're kind of building a deck of, what am I looking for? Spaceships, and it's like this intergalactic conflict. And my kids love it. My youngest in particular totally kicks my butt. And so there's lots of really interesting card games. Actually, this is another one. This is about where I'm at. It's called Taco, Cat, Goat, Cheese, Pizza. And this is hilarious to play.
Violent games we own.
Yeah, right. But it's sort of, and I think that's it's the breadth of options you have these days. So you've got Taco, Cat, Goat, Cheese, Pizza at one end, Star Realms on the other, and so many different things in between. So with Taco, Cat, Goat, Cheese, Pizza, you've kind of got to say the name in an order but the cards might be different, and there's different actions for different cards, and it's just hilarious.
Well, it's
So
basically Snap, right? With a few
yeah,
more bits sprinkled on top. So it's a proven
yeah,
game that kids enjoy and will understand very quickly, but it's also really fun.
yeah, it's hilarious. And then before we were talking about games like Catan, which is also another favorite in this household. And my understanding of that, it's it's a dice game, and you're trying to build roads and cities to resources. So it's about getting resources to build things, and you've got to trade with people. And so, yeah, a really fabulous game to play
Well,
as a
that
family.
Catan is a really, I think the enduring quality of Catan is that negotiation mechanic where I might have three. I'm going to give a terrible example here because I think wool is the one that everyone always is running short of. But you might have a lot of this one resource, and you need that one resource
Yep.
to complete one of your goals, and you have to negotiate with other people around the table. So our kids would be experimenting with negotiation techniques and stuff, and there's always gonna be one player like, no, I don't want you to get ahead, but just giving them experience with negotiating with others, I think is worth the price of admission. And then just going back to Star Realms, a big component of that game that attracted me to it playing with Sam was the arithmetic, because you have to track how many points that you have, how much currency you've built up, and then for each hand you have to do a bunch of adding and subtracting. So playing that with younger kids, it gives them a reason to interact with math that they might not feel comfortable with otherwise. So that classic example of sneaking the veg into this bag bowl, so to speak.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's the great things about board games is there's so many different benefits. A lot of them, especially if you've got dice or something, you've got maths involved, you're connecting with people, so yeah, you're socializing. It can make socializing easier as well
Yeah.
because you're kind of there doing something. You're learning about how to interact with people, like you said, negotiating sometimes, strategy, how am I going to approach playing with this person?
Having a
And
poker face.
yeah, that's right. And there is tons of research out there. I did a quick Google and I was like, yeah, there's like heaps of benefits of board games. It's the cognitive skills, and you've got all those complex thought processes, which gifted kids love.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've got a couple of games here for a particular reason. So when we first started out, the kids were younger, and so we were looking for collaborative board games, so games that we were playing together. And a couple here that we got and like, and if you're listening and think, it's not about finding these specific games, they're just kind of examples of different types of games because there's so many out there. But two that we have, one was called Catch and one's called Outfox, and you play them together. And Catch, you basically, there's a mouse, everyone's a cat, and you've got to work together on this board to catch the mouse. And Outfoxed, there's a thief, and you've got to collectively figure out who the thief is, and you've got to stop, you do it before the fox kind of gets away, kind of thing. So just great examples of games that are aimed at younger kids. Now, I think on the box it says 6 and plus and 5 and plus, but we were obviously playing with our kids at younger age than that because they were gifted and asynchronous, and so that met their needs. But so when it's sort of, when you're thinking about your own children, your own family, I think it's just good to know there's so many board games out there these days that no matter what the age, there would be some kind of collaborative board game that would work if that's what you're after. Another one are like the Forbidden Desert and what's the other one? There's a few forbidden.
There's Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Island, and then the last one in the series, I believe, is Forbidden Sky or Forbidden Skies.
And again, similar kind of working together, but
Yep.
for older age groups, more complicated. I really enjoy these ones as well with the kids.
Yeah, I reckon Forbidden Island and probably Forbidden Island more than Forbidden Desert, because Forbidden Desert has an added dimension of difficulty, whereas Forbidden Island is definitely what would be considered a gateway game, in that you would introduce non-board gamers to it, and it would very likely hook them on board gaming. So it's referred to as a gateway game.
And I think I've also got to do a warning for parents. And that warning comes around the complexity of games. And so I've got a game here called Subatomic, which my eldest, who is right into all things molecular, absolutely loves to play, but is really complicated. And so what you really want is to find like-minded peers so they can dive into that complexity together. But it's nice to know that there are games out there like that that can meet the quirky, high complexity needs of our gifted kids.
And our educational nature, because that same writer is John J. Coyview. I always mispronounce his name, but we have 2 copies of his games. He went on to make a cellular biology game called Cytosis.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he's got one out recently from Kickstarter that we've got called Genotype. So it's basically the story of Mendel and his peas, but it's talking about like the job is to basically create different kinds of pea plants, which it sounds very, very geeky and stuff. It is, but it's also got this educational quality to it, and that mixed with like really, really high-end components and stuff can make for quite a pleasant experience and educational nature. So you could almost say that there's this extra genre of board game around just educational board games, and Subatomic and Cytosis would be really good examples of that.
Yeah, I think I could get into making pea plants over and top of the, making the different molecules. That sounds like a great game.
Something for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So some of the great advantages of playing games, it's all about turn taking, you've got maths, you've got the connection. And I think as well, it's a great opportunity to have that connection time with your kids. And I know if I'm kind of wanting to spend some one-on-one time or family time, it'll often default to a board game that I know that particular child likes or we enjoy as a family, because it's that opportunity to sit down, to laugh, to work together or against each other, whatever it might be. And it can be a really nice place to kind of explore as a family.
And some of these games scale really well as well. I should probably mention boardgamegeek.com is a website that it's basically a huge library of information on every board game pretty much ever made. But one thing it does really well is it allows the board gaming community to weigh in on what the appropriate age for a game is. So a box might say this game is designed for 12 plus, whereas the community might say, no, I play this with my 9-year-old and they're totally comfortable with it. So then there would be that community grade of what the appropriate age is. You mentioned the weight of a game or the complexity of a game. That's also described on boardgamegeek.com. But most importantly is that player count. Like how many players does this game absolutely shine at? Because there are games that are designed for 2 players, chess being an example, and there's a whole ton of head-to-head games. And another thing it does really well is there's a community rating about how good the game is. So Catan Catan came out in like 1995, and it was number 1 on Board Game Geek for like 15 years, because there wasn't a lot of competition. But B, I think a lot of kids grew up playing Catan and fell in love with board games, and then they became board game designers themselves. So that became that their starting point would be Catan. So they would be building off of that. Whereas the people that created Catan, like, who are they building off of? Monopoly?
Yeah.
And chess. Yeah. So boardgamegeek.com is an excellent place if you're curious about a game, is it worth spending a lot of money on? Because some of these games are really quite expensive.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about that. So, yeah, there is the investment aspect of this. Some of them are quite the investment, but we were actually talking earlier saying that these days actually Kmart is actually doing a lot of board games at very reasonable prices.
Kmart's got a
Oh, just say
really
that again.
popular, legitimately good games.
Yeah, some really good games there at Kmart. So worth having a look around. I know when we were starting out, we would head down to the game store and have a chat with people who worked there. And that was really helpful
That
because it
Games
can
World at
feel,
Marion.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
absolutely.
super, super because they love board games. The
Yep.
services have been really good there, and they will definitely steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, so it can be really helpful if the people who work there are board gamers, because it can feel quite overwhelming where to start, and it's nice to get some recommendations and ideas about what works. And so I think actually, a social media posts about this podcast, I will put out there what's your favorite board game so that people can let us know, what are they playing and really enjoying, because I think that getting those recommendations is gold, definitely. And so let's maybe end on, what are some of your favorite board games at the moment? Let's say at the moment.
No, it's very much at the moment. Probably, I think my number one favorite game right now, and Sam's now old enough to start playing it with me, is a game called Terraforming Mars, which came out a couple years ago. There's like hundreds of games coming out every year, but Terraforming Mars, just for someone like it marries a lot of the we were talking about. So there's a card aspect of it, there's a puzzle aspect of it, because you're actually putting tiles on Mars to indicate like you're planting a forest or you're building a city. But the whole object of the game is basically to get the oxygen level up to 14%, the temperature up to 8 degrees Celsius, and to have 9 oceans set somewhere on the map. And then the way that you place them on the map, the way that they fit together, can earn you more points. So it's very puzzly. It can be slightly mean, but it's got the right level of complexity, the right play time. I quite enjoy it. And now that Sam's starting to play it and being quite good at it, it's fun to play with them. And it plays relatively well at a 2-player count. I think it's 3 players where it really shines. But so that would be number one. We tend to play a lot of Pandemic, which is available at Kmart. This is an upgraded version of it on expansion, but you can get Pandemic at Kmart, I want to say for like $39, which is an amazing game. It's a cooperative game, very easy to learn and pick up, and quite challenging. And then we were talking previously about this game Yinch, which I couldn't recommend just because it's hard to get hands on. But this is a very compelling abstract that I quite enjoy playing. A game lasts maybe 20 to 30 minutes. It's very easy to teach, just not hard, or just not easy to come by, frankly. But yeah, you mentioned Outfoxed was a very popular title in our house, and it plays really well with the young ones. It's relatively gentle. If should the fox get away, it's like, he got away. But it's it's very gentle and very pleasant experience, I reckon. So yeah, those would, and then a variation on Pandemic would be this game called Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters that plays really well with young kids, where you're basically going into a haunted house and stealing these gems. But as the game plays on, the number of ghosts that are in the house increases, and then eventually the ghosts turn into poltergeists, and then it gets so the tension ratchets up, but it's not like extreme, it's not scary, but it's always like, can I get out of the house in time before this place is totally overrun with ghosts? And so when you win a cooperative like that, you get that sweet release of like serotonin, and it's fun. It's a fun game, and it's a fun family experience, I think.
Yeah, I actually remember Lil and Michelle playing that game when we were over one time, and it looked like a lot of fun. Actually, that was really, there were different
Yeah, because
rooms, and you
Michelle put
had
like the
to.
little blinking lights up in the poltergeist, so it like added to the theme of it, and it made it like even it made it special, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a lot of fun, board games, highly underrated. And if you're not into board games already, I definitely recommend and checking some out and exploring that as a family. One thing I do want to just kind of end on is it's not just for kids, like you said. And over the last kind of year, a group of mums and I went to our local, there's like a cafe for gamers here in Adelaide called the Lost Dice, and they have lots of games there, and you can basically pick a game, go to your table, play the game, and order like coffee or cocktails and food, and it's just a really nice way of socializing over a board game. And that's actually where I came across that pizza goat cheese a card game. It was hilarious, with a bunch of mums who, some of whom had a glass of wine. Like, it was really funny. And so there's bound to be places like that around. If that appeals to you, check it out. And I know there were a bunch of dads that also went to the same place and had a good time. So it can be a nice alternative way of socializing as parents, or getting together. So definitely something for
Well, and
everyone.
there are groups that get together in community centers and stuff specifically to play board games. So there's quite a board gaming community worldwide, and definitely here in Adelaide.
Yeah, and I think community is such a important and sometimes challenging thing for gifted kids and families. Do you know that finding that peer as a gifted kid can be incredibly difficult? So this is a possibility where you might find other peers, in that kind of extracurricular activity, and well worth having a look at. And I will be doing another episode on D&D alone, but it's a classic example of one of my kids goes to a D&D group, and I'm like, you can't swing a cat for hitting a gifted person in that group. So it's that opportunity of finding like-minded peers. And I think the board gaming community would potentially be similar. Certainly, lots of people with a shared interest. So thank you, Justin, for joining us today. I really appreciate your insight there into board games. And I know you've got an absolute stash of games there.
And it takes up a lot of real estate in the house. So
Yeah, well worth it though. Absolutely. And yeah, appreciate your time in talking us through all the different types of board games, and just kind of opening up that world for us a little bit. I will share the link to, is it boardgamegeek.com?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one other link that I would recommend is I think it's called the Board Game Oracle, but it goes out to all the different websites that sell board games, and it'll rank from cheapest to most expensive. So if you're looking for a bargain, if someone's got it on sale, that's the place to go to find the cheapest copy available in Australia.
Gold. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll share those, and yeah, encourage everyone to go check out board games and something other than Monopoly or Connect
And
4.
don't underestimate Uno or Cluedo, because they are
Yeah.
powerful gateways to the world of gaming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.